So hello, and thank you very much for taking the time to watch me talking about using Flipgrid to reduce transactional distance. Now, in this video, I want to unpack some of the things I did during emergency remote teaching and touch a little on my ongoing research as it relates to the situation at the time this video was produced. Before I do that, I'm just going to give a little bit of background with regard to my experience to set the stage for what's to come. So since starting teaching at university level, I've tried to incorporate a blended learning style into my classes, which I define here as the implementation of computer-assisted language learning approaches in order to supplement in-class activities. Perhaps because of this, I felt that the shift to online teaching was a relatively smooth transition and actually really enjoyed the experience. I currently work at both Dokkyo University and Mukogawa Women's University. I'm interested in research areas such as student use of Google Translate in the classroom and whether teachers can detect its use. The short answer to that question, according to my research anyway, is that teachers identified which articles had been written using Google Translate as opposed to being written by student articles in 74% of cases. And the red flags that gave that information away were pronouns, passive voice, and changes in the spelling of words. My current research project is on student perceptions of the online platform Flipgrid, something I'm fairly confident has been a staple of many a teacher's online classes this last semester. And I'd just like to spell out what my own experience has been and my thoughts on it. So I'd like to start by referencing Michael G. Moore's term transactional distance. Moore's idea has evolved since the 1970s, but it's essentially the psychological distance perceived as existing between students, the teacher, and the online learning system. So the transaction needs to consider the degree of dialogue or interaction, 2, the degree of structure or flexibility built into the course, and 3, the degree of learner autonomy. It's been measured and refined in various ways over the years, but the main takeaway message is that a reduced transactional distance translates into a better experience for online learning when there is a higher connection between students and all elements of the learning environment. And as with many of these concepts, it appears as common sense when spelled out, but it comes into its own when used as a heuristic device. So my own research suggests that Flipgrid was positively appraised by around 60% of students in terms of mediating a feeling of connection with peers. And around 80% appraised it as facilitating a greater understanding of others, including the teacher. Now, although this suggests support for reducing the psychological distance between the community of practice, there was one particular double-edged sword that became apparent as I was collecting the data. So students liked the fact that they could see the speaker's face, but felt embarrassed when showing their own face in their video. So my suggestion that students might want to use some kind of avatar to reduce their embarrassment conflicted with the second finding I've just mentioned. What actually happened can perhaps best be understood when considering the differences in synchronous production versus asynchronous production. So initially, the majority of students had their cameras on during the beginning of synchronous teaching until there was a tipping point and an unspoken consensus that all of the students felt comfortable having their cameras turned off. I actually didn't mind this arrangement, as the students were as friendly as ever and everyone seemed to be comfortable and engaged in the class. I do need to offer a quick caveat here, however, which I can illustrate with reference to something I heard when perusing the breakout rooms in one particular class. So I think the students hadn't noticed that I'd entered their room, and one person was in the middle of relating a story of how her friend had been dyeing her hair during an online class. Fellow teachers related similar stories of a student eating cereal, unaware that his camera was turned on, and quite a comical scene when he realized that everyone could see him eating cereal. And one particularly talented student serenading his classmates with an impromptu guitar session. So I wish I'd been there to see that one. So getting back to the main point, I would say that perhaps because of the camera off arrangement, I felt less of what some have been referring to as Zoom fatigue or even Google Meets fatigue, which isn't to say that I turned my own camera off. I had my own camera on, but quite often used an app to change my appearance for the amusement of the students. So I would appear as a green monster sometimes, dog ears in one class where I was talking about pets, for example. Yeah, just to try and make things fun for the students. By way of contrast, when asked to make their own asynchronous videos to be shown in class, most students chose to show their faces, but there were a few who wore masks or obscured their faces in other ways. So I'm sure other teachers have had similar experiences of students trying to prevent the spread of coronavirus over the internet by wearing a mask. So this struck me as a rather thorny issue, and I want to briefly explain why. So I want my students to become better English speakers, but I also want to take into account digital literacy and reinforce the importance of paralinguistic behaviour, so using body language. So the question then became, do I incentivise students to show their faces by making it a prerequisite for attendance, for example? Or do I allow them some kind of cloak of invisibility, which could potentially empower and allow less confident students to speak up? So I think the point here is that student production doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we need to consider the larger social context within which it takes place, as I will now outline. So to illustrate this line of thinking, I've isolated one particular comment which I received during my research. So one student mentioned that she didn't like the fact that the number of video views on Flipgrid was available for all to see. I'd already turned off the like function as I didn't want student work to turn into a kind of social media popularity contest amid all the research that points to the fact that it causes depression and feelings of inferiority. So I'll just show you some of the comments here. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to share this. So as you can see here, these are some of the things students didn't like about Flipgrid. So embarrassment, I'm ashamed of talking to the camera. Okay, I'm not good at smiling in front of the camera. I hate it being seen by everyone as a video. Don't like my voice. Can't clean my face like a processing app. So yeah, lots of students talking about showing their room, their face, shy, hazukashi, etc. So that seemed a bit of an issue to me. And I was a little bit concerned that students seemed to be embarrassed when making their videos. A second factor was the high number of comments suggesting that there was no face cleaning app to airbrush their appearance, as I've just touched on. So it is in fact possible to use filters to change your appearance when using Flipgrid. You just need to use a different platform and then upload it to Flipgrid. But I conveniently failed to mention this to the students. One reason for this is they've been reported to create a false reality, which sets up a dissonance between a person's actual appearance and their processed appearance online. I'm just going to show you some examples of this, if you give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. So yeah, here we have an article, The Dark Truth Behind Photo Editing Apps That Perfect Your Appearance. So if we scroll down, here we are. So you can see a spring effect here, classic before and after, thin face, okay, thin head, manual mode, Okay, it's interesting to wonder which are the before and which are the after with some of these sometimes. For example, here we have a before and after. I think she actually looks better before. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks, but I think her face is turned into the shape of a lemon in the after picture here. So let's get back to the main point I'm making. Okay, give me 1 second. So yeah, as I was saying, at best this can lead to a feeling of dissatisfaction with one's appearance. At worst, it can lead to body dysmorphia. So in this way, I suggested using avatars when making videos. The results were a little shaky and involved several videos of a disembodied voice and the speaker being replaced with SpongeBob SquarePants or a light fixture, for example. But the idea of avatars is nonetheless a research avenue I'm keen to go down in the future, and I would be grateful if anyone has any more thoughts on the topic of to show or not to show. Okay. In terms of autonomy, which is another strand of Moore's heuristic, I tried to personalize the video topics and give students around 5 questions built around a theme from which they could choose the week before the forthcoming class. One of the theme prompts was often simply stated as your idea, which allowed the students to say anything they wanted, as long as it was related to the overall theme for that week. Flipgrid allowed the students to make around 15 to 25 minutes of focused speaking content spread out over the semester, reducing the burden and stress of having to make one long presentation. The feedback I received even suggested that around 62% of students would prefer to make a Flipgrid video over an in-class video, lending support for the idea that video takes the pressure off the high-stakes atmosphere associated with synchronous production, and there is research to back up that idea. So I'm just going to show you something else, if you give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, let me share my screen again. So here we go. Just need to wait for the, there we go, I can use this now. So this is a video I created. I'm going to try to turn the sound off on this. I'm not sure I can. Yes, I can. Hi, okay, so turn the sound off there. This is just a simple video I made using the classic 2 truths and 1 lie, which I'm sure many teachers have used in their classes. So I talked about dog yoga, canyon swing, and my cousin being an actor on TV, which I try to get into as many classes as I can. You know, hey, my cousin's an actor. And the students had to guess which one is false. So of course, as I'm sure you can imagine, I don't do dog yoga. So that's an example of something I did. And if we go on, we can see this is my cousin. Yeah, I like to bring him up as often as possible as an actor in the family, even when I'm talking to other teachers. There he is. And the last one is the canyon swing. Okay, so this is something I did in New Zealand, and it was the scariest experience of my life. And there's me talking about it while my head's on fire. Okay, so yeah, I like to try to make the videos as interesting as possible, and hopefully it was successful. Right, so getting back to the main topic. In terms of the degree of interaction and dialogue that Flipgrid enabled, I think it works well as a springboard activity for discussion, or in the parlance of the platform itself, a spark. However, rather than the linear approach of having students make their own response videos to my own catalyst video, I decided to use the breakout rooms on Zoom to allow students to work together. The reasons for this were twofold and relate to Leib and Wenger's 1991 notion of community of practice. So Edmund Stone 2017 suggests that it is through the process of sharing information and experiences with the group that members learn from each other and have an opportunity to develop personally and professionally. Wenger views learning and identity as bound together in a process of becoming a certain person, where personal experience is negotiated with respect to the regime of competence of the community. So in other words, I wanted the students to forge friendships so that they would be motivated in the course, but also through the process of scaffolding, come to a consensus regarding the details of my video through sharing their collective understanding. I think that this allowed students to get a better understanding of their teacher and create a connection that wouldn't be possible through simply assigning them listening tasks from the textbook every week, although that's something I also did. In order to do this, I used Google Forms to set mini quizzes and had them watch the video in their cohorts, in their small groups, before collaborating to answer the questions, and then used automated marking to put their scores into Google Classroom. Okay, so the idea with these video quizzes is that stronger students can support less able students, and the developing friendships offer motivation to stay invested in classes. All right, so I'll try to give you an example again of what I'm talking about. Okay, I just need to wait for the, okay, there we go. I can go into this now. So I'm just going to go into Google Classroom. Please bear with me a second here. Excuse the dead time. Okay, so here's classwork. I'm just going to show you something I've been doing. So there's a final assignment, a true or false game, something nice and fun for the students. Right, so view assignment. Instructions. Okay, I'm just going to go back a second. 1 second here. Actually, I'm going to show you, sorry, I'm going to show you a mini test. So this is a different video here. I'm not going to show you this, this video, but I'm going to show you the Google Forms, the Google form I made. So task for mask problems video. So the first question, why did I need to buy a new mask? So this relates to a story, an anecdote I told the students. So in one class we did, the topic was anecdotes, and I wanted the students to tell me, for example, a funny anecdote, a scary anecdote, an embarrassing anecdote, etc. And the students talked for between a minute and a half. I told them a story about forgetting, well, my mask falling out of my pocket, falling into a puddle, and the subsequent story that happened after that, which I won't go into here. So as you can see, there are 5 questions. What wasn't pleasant? And the students have to choose the correct answer. So I think I'm going to explain the reasons that I did this. And I recommend making these mini quizzes. I think they're very useful for the students. Okay, so I'm going to explain the reasons I made these. So yeah, as I say, the idea is that stronger students can support less able students when they work in their breakout rooms and they discuss what they remember from the video. And yeah, the developing friendships offer motivation to stay invested in the class. And also with automated marking, it can save you a great deal of time. The final point I'd like to touch on is the advantage afforded by online teaching in terms of time efficiency. So I think that there is usually a degree of lost time with on-campus classes. The students are keen to catch up with friends and generally settle down into class mode. With online teaching, I found that Flipgrid generally allowed me to use time effectively. And this element of lost time that you sometimes have with on-campus classes wasn't present. Maybe that's just because I couldn't see the students checking their phones, checking their Instagram feed, etc. The lack of commuting time also meant that students were ostensibly more awake in class, as a large body of research points to the circadian rhythms of teenagers and those in their early 20s being later than those of perhaps more advanced years. I also think that even if there is an element of cereal eating, guitar playing, and hair dyeing going on behind the scenes, it's good to cut our students some slack in these hard times. Students might be facing all kinds of pressures, lack of part-time jobs, family members getting ill, the fear of getting ill, etc. So although I'm sure we all want the pandemic to be over as soon as possible, I personally don't feel that teaching quality needs to suffer just because we are online. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to hear any feedback or opinions on what I've said. So thank you very much.